I'm super excited to have our guest here today, Amel Edmond, who is the Chief Information Officer at Withum. And Withum is a top 25 accounting, audit, advisory firm. And we're going to get some amazing perspective on financial services, on the IT stack, in the generation of GenAI. So thanks so much for being here today.
My pleasure. Appreciate it.
There's a lot of different directions we can take this because financial services is a focus of ours at MVP Capital. We're doing a lot around vertical GenAI, and financial services is one of those verticals we're very focused on. On the flip side, you've seen a lot from your seat on what's happening with the replatforming of the IT stack. I'd like to start out with your background. Talk to me about how you ended up in your seat today running as CIO of Withum.
Absolutely. Many moons ago, graduated a degree with mechanical engineering from NJIT, went on to join the military, did some classified work during that time, but moved on to the joining and working on infrastructure and cyber and things of that nature. So as I progressed in my career, my focus was mainly on cybersecurity and infrastructure. Got into the CIO role, obviously, because I continued to evolve and develop my skills and sharpen things. And I unfortunately got kicked out of my cyber responsibilities. I'm still trying to dig into there once in a while, but my team continuously likes to tell me, hey, focus on being CIO, be more strategic and things of that nature. But I love what I do. And I tell people all the time that, if I wasn't getting paid to do this, I'd be doing it anyway. So I'm a technologist at heart.
That's fantastic. Not many people could say that about their day jobs. I love it. What does a CIO in your seat at Withum do? Like, what are your main responsibilities?
Well, it's actually a pretty heavy load if you really think about it. The list goes on and on. You wear multiple hats. On a high level, you're in charge of everything technological related, whether it is software acquisitions, cybersecurity, infrastructure, build out, any sort of strategic objective that needs to be done or executed falls to your lap. On top of that, let's focus on risks and governance. All of those possibilities also fall in my lap. I work closely with our general counsel. I work closely with all of the industry niche leaders just to understand what their business needs are and what their goals are. And we try our best to align effectively. And that's the general, high level view of what I do on a regular basis. But every day is different, whether I'm doing speaking engagements, whether I'm focusing on culture development or just bringing up the next level of technologists from the ground up. I'm responsible for that top to bottom.
Which actually is funny because, there's a whole lot of workforce development and human development that goes with running an organization. And I wasn't even thinking about that. I was kind of thinking about like your purview from a structural perspective.
Right.
So digging into that, we're talking about, business line decision-making, IT stack, cyber, governance. One of the reasons we do this show is because we want founders in our portfolio and founders, out there in the world to hear from decision makers who are buying software, buying services, dealing with third parties. Talk to us about maybe what that experience has been like for you. So what does it look like when you think about engaging with a third-party software provider?
Well, number one, you have to, before you even get into the engaging of the third-party vendor, you have to understand what is our end goal. What are we trying to achieve? Once you understand that clearly, you have the key measures of success, then you can backtrack and say, okay, fine, when is the expected delivery time for this project? And then you start looking and evaluating the technology that you currently have in-house. But at least that's my approach. And then I look to see if the technology that we have in-house doesn't meet our objective or our goals, not capable of actually providing that service, then we actually start having conversations externally with vendors. I personally don't like the term vendor. I prefer partner. I like to try my best to try to limit the amount of vendors in our technology stack and start really creating a holistic partnership with organizations where we can start saying, all right, you have out us this one service. Let's see how it works for the next year or two. And from there on, we explore the rest of the technology stack and eventually expand from there. But to answer your question, once you understand what the end goal is, then you start having conversations with those quote unquote vendors, analysis, understand the cost benefit, present those options to the organization. I try to limit the options to 3. I tend to obviously have several conversations, whether it's leveraging organizations similar to Gartner or Infotech, things like that. Those are the tools that I have in my tool belt to really evaluate and understand what exactly the vendor is capable of doing, executing, And I also have a very tight circle of other CIOs that I speak to in the financial industry, as well as outside of that, just to get a full scope and understanding of, hey, have you guys used product X or organization X?
Yeah.
And what is your feel? How did they actually get executed for you? Who were the key players and how did they design that team? What was that timeline? So I ask all those questions, and that circle is pretty tight. Everyone knows each other to some degree, and we ask each other a lot of questions, really like shrinking that time of development or actually just trying to figure out exactly what you're getting into with, product X or vendor X.
Do you build anything internally with them, or is all your systems sort of like with partners?
Well, yes, there are several products that we actually build. We have an innovation team headed up by our chief innovation officer, and they basically are all of our app development people. They have vendors that actually supplement their work because obviously you want to make sure that they have specific expertise in this or that. But they build. My team tends to traditionally buy, but we work very, very close together because obviously as they build, we need to make sure that it aligns with governance, risk, and we also make sure that everything that they build is also secure.
Can you walk me through a buy versus build decision? You don't have to be super specific if the names get you in trouble, but like on a project or a problem that you're trying to solve and what the framework was.
Right. So buy versus build, obviously there has to be a cost benefit analysis for both. So the question that you have to ask is, how soon would you like to get there?
Yeah.
Right. So that's the big thing. If you like to get there fast, you have to buy. And it also depends on the scope of the actual build. If it's something that can be built within a week or two, then you might as well just build it and you should be fine. Because obviously the totality of the cost of it, year after year will outweigh the build time of 1 week.
Yeah.
Now, if it's something that you're going to have to spend $3 million to build R&D and eventually understand the compliance that are behind it, and also hire an entire team to maintain the platform, that's where you're really starting to weigh out the options of buy versus build. Ultimately, a decision of that magnitude, we normally tend to go towards the buy option.
Got it. And one thing you and I talked a good amount about before was GenAI and how it's changing so many different verticals and just changing the way we work. Has it changed the way you think about build versus buy?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
If you think about it right now, whenever you're buying a product, there's so much time and R&D involved in that process. That's really what you're paying for, because once the product is built, there's not really too many changes that are being applied to it. So you're spending a lot of money on R&D for that organization. With AI or GenAI or all these other acronyms or versions of AI that's actually being spawned out there, that time of delivery for any sort of platform has drastically been reduced. Whether it is Copilot many moons ago, and right now we just talked about a little bit about Replit. There's a lot of different organizations out there that are very disruptive. So app development has gone from producing a product in a year, 2 years, down to months. And right now what I'm seeing, and I've tested it myself, you can actually get a product rolled out in a matter of days. If not, depending on the size of the product, you can have it done in about an hour.
Yeah. And you don't get a finished product, but you get something that's like a good working prototype to understand like how people might interact with something.
Correct. I mean, I would probably say right now you can get a good MVP, a viable product out using all these different platforms. But having the general understanding of the platform or what you're trying to obtain is where the real knowledge and the upskilling of our population or the resources comes in. The task of actually doing or compiling code, those days are pretty much gone and over with. What we're focusing on is upskilling our existing resources or our skills to make sure that we understand where the data is, how to connect them all together, and being more of an architect versus an actual engineer.
I love that. And that resonates because like the underlying data is the key to using foundational models, is the key to building applications on top of that. When you think about partnering now, do you want to partner with the big foundational companies like the OpenAIs or Anthropics of the world? Or do you want to partner with the application layer startups that are building on top of those LLMs?
I like partnering with both. There are pluses and minuses to both options. I mean, the larger organizations obviously have their benefits because a lot of that's already been vetted out. The smaller organizations, which I like to call the upstarts, even in the accounting industry, there are large organizations, there are small ones. I love what the large organizations have done by setting up the foundation and setting up the structure. However, they're not as nimble. The smaller organizations can turn around and execute on a change that you are specifically asking for relatively quickly. And that's what I like having a mix of both, because that's pretty much sort of like, if you're actually driving only on larger organizations, sort of like Microsoft, at that point, they can literally drive the price as high as they want at that point.
Yeah. So it's kind of keeping the partners honest by looking at different options.
Exactly.
That's interesting. And there's two places we can go here, because what's interesting about your business is financial services. There's a lot of innovation happening around GenAI. That's a business line thing. And then there's also a lot of innovation happening around governance and cyber and just security in general.
Correct.
But let's go down the financial services route.
Sure.
What are you seeing as sort of the biggest change with GenAI in audit, in tax advisory, in accounting? What's happening?
Let's look at audit, for example. One of the main platforms that we used to use was currently used was a Wolters Kluwer's product. And obviously it's taken a long time for that product to evolve and to change, or to even their back end is still fairly clunky for our perspective.
Yeah.
It gets the job done. I believe a good portion of the accounting industry uses that specific platform. However, there are other products that I'm seeing out there. I'm not going to name them, no shameless plugs. I do see a lot of smaller organizations, and if they're listening, they know exactly who they are, that I speak to on a regular basis. And their ability to apply artificial intelligence from the ground up, not something that's you've already in the system that's fairly archaic at this point, very hard to manipulate. If it's AI at its core, it can grow exponentially versus what we're currently leveraging currently. So with that in mind, we actually worked very closely with the AI CPA and Caseware, and we actually put together a platform called a dynamic audit solution. That platform I feel is very, very disruptive. We're actually leveraging it currently. We're actually the first accounting firm to complete a full audit from end to end on the platform. So great job to the audit team that actually got that done. But that's the power of artificial intelligence. And from a business side of things, they were able to actually roll this product out, and we're all artificial intelligence based, all RPA based, and you'll essentially be able to perform audit tasks as autonomously as you can probably get. Right now, there's a lot of human power that's associated with it.
Yeah.
Right. So what does that do for a business? That literally helps you maximize your profitability. All right. And us as an organization, we tend not to, if we're saving and it actually looks better for our bottom line, we actually pass some of those savings on to the client. Because, there's nothing worse than you automating a process and then I'm still charging you $100 when it's really it went from $50 over my overhead. Right. Now
and your gross margin goes from 50 to 90. Right. There's some shared savings in there, which makes sense. That makes sense.
And it makes sense. And on top of that, you're looking at not having to leverage so many resources, whether it is stateside or offshore.
Yeah. See, that's the really interesting dynamic, and that's where we've seen a lot of potential for change, happen in financial services. But like you said, with audit, there's still a need for human eyes and human judgment. So where are we in that progression of fully automated is here and zero automation is here? Where are we today, and what's holding us back from going full automation?
Well, in all reality, it all depends on the organization's appetite for technology and their comfort level with artificial intelligence and autonomy. So, our organization, I don't really call us bleeding edge, but we're pretty out there.
Yeah.
We're a very technology focused firm, and the leadership of the firm really embraces technology, which is something that was very, very, very refreshing when I walked in the door. Because I had a lot of zany ideas with people kind of going, oh no, this guy's we don't know if he's going to make it. But my ideas panned out. I had a great team behind me that gave me a lot of these ideas, and we cultivated them, presented them. The firm bought in, and we were able to be very successful in protecting the firm, as well as providing next level technology that was pretty much a lot of the firms are not as far ahead of technology as we are. I mean, there's several examples that we should probably get into a little bit later. But around resources, if you're looking at leveraging technology effectively, you have to upskill your end user population. Not only the professional staff, but the technology people that are around it, the admins. Everyone essentially has to upskill to some degree in order for you to become an architect sort of person versus an engineer.
And that's what's holding us back from getting to full automation. So that's like a progression over time, even if the technology is available.
Right. It all starts from the top. I mean, leadership has to have that appetite for technology and trust for it. The technologists have to create that trust by proving that it actually is functional and stable. And then the last part of that is making sure that your resources are adopting it. Yeah. So it's a three-pronged attack that you have to have, from the leadership level to the technology level to the end user's perspective.
And that makes a lot of sense. If I'm a startup, if I'm a smaller partner, right?
Mhm.
I'm sure you work with some big partners and you work with mid-size or smaller venture-backed partners. What's the right way to sell into Withum, and what's the right way to sell into just firms of your scale overall? Is it talking to you? Is it talking to business line, decision makers who are running one of the groups? Like, what's the best way in?
The best way is to really just talk to everyone, but understanding how the organization works is key. Just talking to, let's say, a staff one auditor or a tax person is probably not your easiest way in. Your best point of entry is obviously talking to the technology people, the people that are in charge of technology, that are in charge of innovating the firm. Those are your best point of contact because they're going to be your point of contacts anyway. The other side of that is, that technologist should have a direct line and alignment with those audit, head of tax, the head of audit, those kind of individual, but also have those conversations. The other opportunity there is you also have to be where they're going to be. Mm-hmm. So there are a lot of conferences in financial services, specifically in accounting. For example, AICPA's Engage conference, which is actually in June. Yeah. There's a lot of different conferences that are out there. If you are physically there, you can actually show off your product and you can actually start meeting the individuals that are there to make those decisions and help you out.
Got it. So that's one way. It's like kind of starting with IT, making sure IT is aligned with the business decision makers. What about, like, you have an innovation group? Mm-hmm. One thing that our startups have struggled with sometimes is innovation groups can be amazing because they open the door to startups. Right. And sometimes that's where it ends. In a not so good scenario, it's sort of like there's budget, but that budget's like a one-time budget. Right. How do you think about startups sort of using innovation groups to get into a ongoing relationship? And what questions should they ask to understand whether it's like a real like opportunity or whether it's just like a one-off thing? Right.
So if you're going to have a conversation with a head of innovation or an innovation department to begin with, you have to understand what is the organization's general goal. Yeah. How do you plan on, executing on that? And asking that innovation leader, what is actually your charter? Mm-hmm. Every department should technically have a charter. Yeah. Here's our mission statement, here's our charter, and here's what our goal is for this year and the next 3 years to come. Once that organization understands that, then you can say, okay, fine, here's how I can help you do that. Here's what our product lines are able to execute on. And here's what we've also done for an organization of your size and the same sort of business line.
Okay. So it's really asking those discovery questions to sort of get a sense of like what the remit of what the focus of that group is.
Exactly.
Then, the other side of that is, what are some mistakes that you see startups make selling into larger enterprises that you see consistently crop up?
It's the same one. It's the overselling and under-delivering. Right? We'll be able to do this for you.
By the way, our startups never do that.
Of course not. Never.
Consistently under-promise and over-deliver.
I love that. And that's why we do business together, right? But yeah, so over-promise and under-deliver is probably one of the biggest pet peeves across the board. And I'll be very honest with you, I sat across a lot of CEOs, and they tend to all say that software organizations lie to you. Mm-hmm. They're lying through their teeth. The question is, who's lying to you least? And that's an unfortunate stigma that a lot of software organizations actually have out there, just strictly because, just bad experiences. Yeah. Hey, we'll be able to get this thing done for you in 2 weeks. Then, no one's project managing it properly. And then there's a delay, there's a holiday. And before you know it, you're a week behind schedule. Yeah. The issue is they're not seeing that the CEO is counting on that execution. Mm-hmm. That week behind schedule could potentially cost an organization millions of dollars.
Yeah. That's a really unique perspective. I've asked that question a few times, and like that's such a great like boots on the ground, example of like what startups can do better. That I think startups are programmed to dream big, which is part of like having a vision, but then like delivering right now is super key. So that's very helpful. Talk about the fraud vector that's grown as a result of GenAI and what you're seeing on the other side of that around cybersecurity.
Sure. Like I said before, one of my main pillars of understanding is cybersecurity infrastructure. The bad guys are out there. Yeah. And they actually have been using artificial intelligence way before it became mainstream, to keep that in mind. The idea of exfiltrating data or any sort of like fraud or ransomware, all that starts with a script, which essentially is what RPA is, robotic process automation. But now they've gotten very, very deliberate. They've gotten very specific with their attack vectors. One key example, I think this was in the news, I think maybe a year and a half ago. A bank was actually the target of a very elaborate deepfake. Mm-hmm. That deepfake involved images of 3 of the top executives and the CFO. The CFO being the target. That CFO, unfortunately, went to their Facebook site, clicked onto a link, and during that link process, that bad actor was able to drop off a payload on that person's endpoint, basically their laptop.
Yeah.
Now, from that point forward, the payload went ahead and did something very minor. It didn't look like anything major. It went in and changed one simple thing, a calendar entry. Changed the link in the calendar entry. She saw it pop up. She hit accept because it looked like it was from, John Doe, CEO.
Yeah.
All right, cool. John Doe wants to change my meeting from this to this.
Yeah.
Cool. Looks the same. Great. 3 months later, okay, they're very patient. 3 months later, they went ahead and had enough recordings of the CEO, the COO, and a few other executives that were on the board because they had speaking engagements. Had those images replicated, their voices replicated, and from that point on, the bad actor went ahead and had a meeting with said CFO. And obviously, we're in the post-COVID days, so everyone's sort of virtual or their own.
Yeah, they accept that could be a thing.
Right.
Yeah.
So she's talking to these people, and it all looks as if they are all in one boardroom. Yeah. As they normally are. She's talking, and they're going through her regular monthly report. Yeah. And she goes through, and at one point, the CEO of the alleged person said, let me stop you for 1 second. I think everything's going great. We got word of a really big acquisition. I need you to transfer $25 million from this account to this. All right, I just sent that over to you. If you do me a favor and just verify that you got it. Yes, I got it. And then they said, you know what? We'll wait. Just stand by. I'm just going to grab a coffee. Just hang out. And then she went ahead, bypassed her own protocols, mind you. There's a series of protocols that a bank would have to go through to transfer that large amount of money. So she went ahead, clickety-clacked away, transferred, and then continued with the rest of her meeting. Yeah. So they completed her update. All right, we'll see you next time. Bye, John. Bye, whoever. And then didn't think anything of it. The next day, she got a phone call, needless to say, it wasn't a very positive one. And the amount of processing power that it takes to run a deep fake of that magnitude is significant. But the thing is, the pay is so great. Being able to mirror anyone and saying, all right, fine, I've seen you speak at Microsoft or Cisco Live or any of those things. Yeah. And now you capture the person's voice, capture their likeness. You make that person, say whatever you want. All you have to do is just type it up and they'll do it. So that's the kind of artificial intelligence that the bad guys are using. Now, what are we doing at Withum?
Yes. And where does this sit? So is this the thing that wakes you up, in the middle of the night thinking, is this your highest priority right now from a technology purchasing standpoint?
Oh yeah, hands down. I mean, I understand the need for making sure that we are being, very forward thinking and profitability and those sort of things. But, one of the things that keeps me up at night, and I'm actually going to be speaking about this next month at a conference, what keeps CIOs up at night. One of the main things is cybersecurity. Yeah. All right. Cybersecurity obviously means if something bad happens, there's a financial penalty for that, regardless of where you are. All right. But the biggest hit is really reputational. If we get breached, think about what happened to CrowdStrike not too long ago. Yes. They lost billions. Yeah. And right now their reputation is still tarnished. I mean, they'll recover. They have, they have reputation insurance. They have those sort of things in place. Right. But that revenue that they could have kept is astronomical. That's right. So that's one of my main objectives is to make sure that the firm is safe, but not only the firm, but our clients' information is safe. Financial organizations such as ourselves is a treasure trove of PII, banking information. I mean, I'll give you another example. How easy it is to actually, exfiltrate someone's entire 401k. Yeah. And no one do this at home, please. So, bad actor got a copy of the person's, driver's license. All right. You do enough social engineering, you can figure out that person actually has a, let's say, Wells Fargo account. Okay, great. Now with that license and that information, you're not going to call Wells Fargo and say, give me all the money. Yeah. No. What if I were a bad guy, would actually take that information, change the image, and I'll keep everything the same. Yeah. Okay. And I'll go up to Wells Fargo and say, hey, you know what? I have these other accounts, verify the information that they already know, establish trust by proving to them that I am this person, and then further establish trust by depositing a $9,000 check into a brand new account. Oh, great. Wells Fargo will happily take more money. Right. Right. And then 2 weeks later, you come back and say, I plan to transfer money from that account to this account. Keep in mind, you already established trust originally.
Yeah.
They know who you are. They've seen you last week.
Yeah.
Great. You transfer those funds over, you hit OK, and then off you go. Within seconds of you doing that, they have a script running that extracts all of those funds to an offshore account.
So this is the first example of the CFO transferring money, going around protocols. And in this example, sort of deep fake examples are possible now with GenAI. Do the existing security software companies have the solutions, or do you think the solutions to fight that are going to come from startups?
It's a combination of both. And then really, the main line of defense is really the individual.
Yeah.
Using common sense should be common, but it's not. If you did not execute a login, why would you hit the OK for your MFA to allow that person to log into your system? So there's ways of doing that. There's protocols you can put in place that literally harden the environment. For example, not allowing your logins to be logged in from specific places, places that are popular for hacking. North Korea, things like that. You should actually have all those IP addresses blocked. That should be a standard, but not everyone does it. There's a lot of different technologies you can put in place. We use specific, I'm not going to say the names, but we use 2 MI5 and NSA grade pieces of hardware and software to actually keep our clients' information safe as well as our end users safe. So we're leveraging a lot of different layers of AI to ensure that if there is anything wrong with the primary, you have some sort of redundancy in place.
So there's not like a silver bullet. There's just a set of systems to solve for the likelihood of individuals sort of making a mistake, all the way up to like the system-wide architecture around data security.
That's exactly right. I mean, and it all depends on, again, the organization's appetite for technology. And how much business risk are they willing to assume?
Yeah, very, very interesting. Well, it's an exciting time, I think, unfortunately, to be a fraudster, but it's a more exciting time to be on the right side of things, like you are fighting to keep our data safe and our private information safe.
Absolutely. It's great to be there. And I have a passion for this. Oftentimes my team catches me on at 3 o'clock in the morning, even though I have a 6 o'clock flight, and I'm just trying to figure out what the bad guys are doing, setting up a honeypot to see how they're trying to break in. Those are all things that I enjoy doing. It's basically a passion of mine.
Very cool. Well, thanks again for being here.
My pleasure.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Bye.